what's God's definition of a teacher? And so I found two verses that I want you to see in your workbook. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the judgments which I teach you." This is in the Old Testament, and if you know much about the Bible, you know that the Old Testament is really not written in English. It is written in Hebrew. And so I eventually want to study that Hebrew word, which I teach you to observe, to do, that you may live and go in and possess the land which your Lord God of your fathers has given you. So that's the word teach in Deuteronomy 4:1, and the next verse in your workbook is Deuteronomy 5:1. Let's take a look at it. "And Moses," this is the next chapter in the same book, "and Moses called all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the judgments which I speak in your hearing, that you may, learn them." So I wanted to know a very simple thing. That's teaching. This is learning. I wanted to know what those Hebrew words meant. And so I got out my Hebrew Bible, and I have made a copy of that for you in the next visual. And it is an interlinear that brings together the Hebrew words and the English translation beneath it. And what I did, I'm just going to show you what I did. I came over here, and I looked at Deuteronomy 4:1, and I found "I am teaching," and there it is, right there. And I looked at those letters, and I said, okay, and I put that word on a separate piece of paper. And I looked it up in the Hebrew dictionaries and so forth, and then I came down over here, and I looked for the word "to learn." There it is right there. And I want to know what it meant. And as I studied those two words, how could you say this? I felt like I was in a completely dark room, and somebody came in, and just all the floodlights was so overwhelmingly clear that I said to myself, well, look at that. Because when I look at the word teaching, look at these last three letters. It's LMD, lamad in Hebrew. And I came down here, and I looked carefully at this, and I found, no, this can't be true. There's the L, like that L. There's the M, that's M. There's the D, that's D. This is a prefix, this is a suffix. It's the exact same root word. It's the exact same root word. And I wanted to know, what does teaching mean? Well, in Hebrew, when you take a verb and you want to make it to be that the person who does the verb causes it, you put a certain prefix and suffix around it, and you put it into you put it into the PL, basically. And what happens is this. To teach means this: to take the action of the verb, which is to learn, and to be the causer of the verb. What does teach mean? Teach means I am the person who causes you to do this. I cause you to learn. That if you haven't learned, LMAD, LMD, then I haven't taught, LMD. Therefore, in God's mind, the teacher and the learner is connected, and you can't separate it. It's the same word. Therefore, the idea that's rampant around the world, and test scores are going down in almost every country of the world, even though we're paying teachers more. That's true. In America, the scores are plummeting, and we're paying the teachers more and more every year. Paying teachers more doesn't mean students learn better. It just means the teacher has a better level of living. And I want to go back, because if we can ever remember what's the truth, that I exist to cause you to learn. That's why I exist. If you haven't learned, biblically speaking, I have not taught you. This is the most powerful truth about being an effective communicator. that I realize unless it happens in you, I've not done anything. I've just talked. Did you get this? Is this a powerful truth or what? It's a powerful truth. That's why Dr. Howard Hendricks told the joke early, finished half a chart, walked over here to the edge of the platform, got off the platform, ran down the aisle, and yelled at a student, 1 out of 30, because that student wasn't learning, and he knows if that student's not learning, I am failing as a teacher. I'm failing as a teacher. Not only does this take place in the classroom, this takes place in the pulpit. Because in the pulpit, when you study the New Testament to see what does God want the pastor to do, Jesus made it very clear. I command you to teach my word so that they obey what I've said. Whoa. Therefore, the teacher exists to cause the person to learn the truth that's supposed to be learned. The pastor exists to teach the truth so that the person changes their behavior and they obey the Bible. And if the person isn't changing and becoming more obedient, then they haven't really preached. They have spoken. So God's position in both of these is don't focus on the person up front. Focus on the people that are the recipients of what you're doing. And if your church, if the people in your church aren't changing, you're failing. You're failing. And if the students aren't learning the content and the skills, you're failing. And once this becomes in your heart, I am the one who's responsible to cause you to learn, it's pretty tough to be boring. Because learning plummets. I mean, it disappears when you have a boring communicator. When your teacher's boring, you don't learn hardly anything. So let's get into this. I've tried to summarize this on a chart to the right, and it is called the learner model. And I want to get into this because it summarizes how we've been thinking about this. We're on the law of the learner. The most powerful secret of all master teachers is they buy into this. No more divorce. No more divorce. I am married to the students. And I haven't taught unless you have learned. No more of this. I've done my job. I've covered the material. It's your fault if you didn't learn it. Ooh. My son heard this law. And about a week later, he comes back from school. He says, hey, Dad, yeah, I wish the teachers at my school heard this stuff you taught. They are so boring. And Dad, I'm not doing very well in my classes because they're not causing me to learn. And I said, well, son, you didn't hear me talk about the law of the student. That is the law of the student. Yes. What's the law of the student? The student is responsible to learn regardless of the teacher. Yeah, but that's true as well. That is, when you're in the role, listen carefully, when you're in the role of the teacher, you are to cause 100% of your students to learn. When you're in the role of the student, you are responsible to learn regardless of the effectiveness of your teacher. Now, this course isn't about the student learning. It's about you causing them to learn, and that's what we're focusing on. So let's go on to the next chart and deal with a summary of this. There's the chart. You have it in your workbook. Here is the speaker. So write that word, speaker. And the right-hand side is the student. So go ahead and write that in your workbook, the speaker and the student. And typically, what do we do with this? We, as a speaker or a teacher who is the communicator to the class, and in the middle is the content. This is the subject. And you can see the open book there. Well, what does the speaker or the teacher typically do? What do they think their responsibility is? Notice the focus in the yellow arrow is the teacher typically thinks, my job is to talk about the content. That's my job. Look at that carefully. That is, the old way is the speaker focuses on the subject. And if I've covered the subject, I've taught. So the focus is on the content. And because the focus is on the content, I lecture. And the student, what are they trying to do? They're trying to listen. What's the speaker doing? Is giving words. Words. What does the student do? Write the words down. We're trying to say there's a whole other focus. I remember talking to one lady and I said, what do you teach? I teach math. I said, you do? I thought you taught students. But wait now, that's just a simple little tweak, because teachers or speakers or preachers who focus on what they say focus on the subject. They don't focus on the student. They focus on the subject. And what the students learn to do is just to listen and to write. So they're there and they're just writing down what the person said. And what happens in this middle is there's a pit of passivity. The pit of passivity. And what we are sharing with you in the learner model is that there's another way to approach this. The focus should not be on your subject. The focus should be this yellow arrow all the way down. Your focus is on the student, to get the student to say, wow, I get this. I don't focus on the subject, I focus on the student. I've been doing this ever since I started this session. That is, it's taking me a while for me to feel the fact that everybody in the room got it. I stayed on this idea for 14 minutes longer than I planned. Why? I am responsible to turn the light on for you so that I am confident everybody in the room, the light went on and they were convicted about, I haven't taught until I've caused you to learn. And I went over that. Then I backed over here and went over it again, and I gave you another illustration, and I exhorted you, and I talked about a passage from the Bible. I then came over to the preachers, and I talked about the same idea. I went around that big idea at least 6 ways. Why didn't I go on to the rest of the outline yet? Because you were still thinking about it. Because to many people, this is a new idea. What's the implication then of a person who really gets a hold of the law of the learner? The implication is you will never be the same. You will never be the same. If you haven't learned or you haven't changed, I failed. I was teaching a bunch of business people once on how to double your business and grow it quickly, and a CEO of a large company came up and said, I'm in the middle of getting an MBA, Master of Business. And he said, a very famous teacher, the chairman of the Department of Business, is amazing teacher. And he came into class and he said to me and to you and everybody else, you know what? 70% of you are going to fail this class. And he said to me, this man talking to me, he said, he is an amazing teacher. I said, let me ask you a question. What do you do in your business? He said, I make these things here. I said, okay. If 70% of the gadgets you make broke for the customer, what would happen to your business? He said, you mean 70% of what the people bought broke? Yeah, I'd go out of business. I said, that's right. You have the worst teacher you will ever have. Because he is telling you up front, I will fail 70% of the people. That man should be fired. Yeah, but wait, he should be fired. How do you know if you have a great teacher? By the grades of the student. Whoa! It's not the degrees of the teacher. Why do we always pay the teacher to get the next degree if the test scores of the students don't go right up? It's so backwards. It's because the administration around the world have been suckered to believe a lie, that it's not the teacher's responsibility to cause the student to learn. So, what's the big idea across the bottom then? What's the summary as we're thinking about this? It is to cause the student to learn, to cause the student to learn the subject. Now, here is the zinger at the end. Most schools put a period right there. Cause the student, they don't even have this part right. Cause the student to learn the subject, period. That's not the point. Wait. What do you mean that's not the point? That's not the point. What's the point of learning the content? Why are you taking this course? Why are you learning? To cause the student to learn the subject to become more successful. If the student isn't more successful, why on earth did they take the subject? So you are looking all times about this issue of how do I become a teacher that causes you to learn in such a way that the student becomes more successful because they sat onto me and were a part of it. I want you to close your workbook now. And I want to ask you a question. I was up in Alaska one time, and some missionaries asked if I would come minister to them for a day. And they asked me to teach a course about how to teach. And I didn't know that they had read my book, The 7 Laws of the Learner, before I came. And so we were in a beautiful log lodge made out of giant trees. Alaska is magnificent. I've caught many salmon in Alaska. And all of a sudden, I noticed people looking out that window. And I thought to myself, I bet you there's a moose out there. Then more of the people started looking out and said, man, there must be a big moose out there. Until finally, some people over here were standing up, looking out the window. And I said, oh man, I actually said out loud, boy, there must be something really remarkable. And I came off this platform, I came out and looked out the window, and there was nothing out the window. And the people start laughing, and they said, 8 minutes and 30 seconds. I failed. Yeah, but come on. So as we close this first session, I want you to really deal with this question. It's a hard issue, isn't it? It's a hard issue. Will you break from the past? Will you change your mind? Will you say, never again will I feel or accept the fact that I was successful unless my students really nailed the test? Because if you don't buy into this, I don't want you in the rest of the course. I don't. I'm not going to give you the secrets if you're going to remain selfish. Selfish means it's all about me. And most teachers don't know how selfish we are. When it's just about me talking. It's not about me. It's about you. And if I haven't caused you to change, I have failed terribly. And until you switch, I don't want to give you any more secrets. I don't want to equip you to become more selfish. This makes sense? So, will you make the switch? Will you buy into this? You mean right here? Yeah. Can you really buy into it just like that? No, it's not been like that. It's been a half an hour. But you now know the truth. From the Bible's point of view, you can never again say, I've taught unless you've learned. You can't ever do it again. That needs to get right here. If that gets here, I want to equip you the rest of the time we have. Oh, you're going to learn so much about how do you do that. But unless the person, like yourself, really buys into the fact, oh man, I'm a change agent. Oh, and I am going to learn how to do this no matter what. Because once you commit to this, then you are hungry for how do I cause a student to learn? And that's what the rest of this whole course is how do you do this? But without the desire, without the motive, without the want, I don't want to tell you this. So, can I ask you to make a decision? So if you hereby commit inside, and this way if you know God, hey, Lord, forgive me for being selfish. I hereby commit to you. I'm moving in this direction very quickly. And the difference of my students is going to be dramatic. I was teaching 10,000 professional teachers one time, all day, at the Anaheim Convention Center in California. At lunchtime, an older gentleman came to me and said to me, I must show you the blue sheet. And he came up to me and he said, I retired from teaching for 40 years. And then I came and I heard you at a conference in the Midwest in Chicago. And he said, as I heard you teach all this stuff, I realized I wasn't doing any of it. And it so overwhelmed me that I realized I had failed all these years. That he says, I was traumatized. And he said, I said to God, God, give me another chance. He said, I ought to retired. So I went home and I prayed again, God, give me another chance. And the principal of the school I used to teach at called me up and said, one of our teachers is ill for an extended illness, and I wondered if you would come back out of retirement and come teach. He said, yes, I will. He said, the first thing I did is I came in and I realized the grade book is my grade book. He said, he pulled out this blue piece of paper he had in his pocket. It was folded up, and he said, here are all the students' names, and here's the grades when I took over. They weren't very good grades. And he said, I began to cause those students to learn, and I began using all those tools you gave us, because you gave us a lot of them. And he said, now, because he had this page folded over his grades. And then he said, now look what happened to the same students after 30 days, and flipped it over. And the grades were A's and B's, and he was floating on air. He said, finally, I've become a teacher. What's the dream we have as servants of yours? We dream that the countries of the world who aren't happy with the learning of their students would send their principals and their teachers to learn all these courses, because this is just the first of many courses, and that the learning of the students of the countries of the world would turn right upside down, because believe it or not, when you learn a few of the secrets, the scores of your students can radically change almost overnight. May it be true. In the Pompo region, there's 100 principals attending this course. And I want to speak to you as a principal. Ultimately, God has given you the leadership role for a whole school. You are responsible to cause the teachers to cause the students to learn. How do you know what kind of principal you are? It's not by the facility you have. It's not by the textbooks you do or do not have. It's not how many degrees your faculty has. You know what it is? Did you cause your teachers to become teachers who cause their students to learn, and are the grades of your students just like this, so the parents are coming to you saying, oh, thank God for the school? That's how you'll know if you're an effective principal, and we're here to serve you in any way possible. But before we take a discussion break, I want to ask you just a quick question. Will you commit right now to become a person who causes the students to learn, or causes your students, who are called congregation in your church, that they become more obedient? Because that's this role. If you will you stand up, find somebody else nearby who's standing up, give them a handshake and say to them, I hereby commit to you that as of today, I am changing sides and I'm going to cause my students to learn. Then quickly sit down. If that's true about you, on your feet, find somebody else, tell them that, and then be seated.